let's discuss, are the Elohim, the Anunnaki, and even the Neteru, are they the same? Let's start with the oldest of the bunch, or the purportedly oldest, and that is the Anunnaki and possibly the Neteru, but we're going to focus on the Anunnaki and the Elohim first. For the Anunnaki, we have at least 7 to 12 major deities, along with a possibility of up to 70, even over 70 at after a certain point amount of deities. And this familiarity is going to come back up to 7 to 12 or even up to 70 deities that are important to these people. And the Anunnaki were worshipped by the people of Mesopotamia, of Sumer, of Babylonia, of Akkad, or of Assyria, and even in the Levant, even in the Arabian Peninsula, because the Anunnaki were spread across that area, spread across the Middle East, spread across the ancient Near East. So what we see in this list or lineup of Anunnakis is we see Tiamat and Apsu. These would be the predecessors to Anu and Enlil and Enki and all the other deities. But sometimes they're not even the exact predecessors. Sometimes it's Alala and it's Beleli. Sometimes it's Anshar and Kishar. Or it's even Lamu and Lahamu. But either ways, we're going to go with Tiamat and Apsu, because that's the more standardized version, right? And then we have Anu and Ki, or Anu and Yerash, because he had more than one consort. And Ki and Yerash are not the same consort. They are different beings, purportedly, based off of evidence that I've seen. Now, we can sit here and try to conflate those two or equate those two, but Ki and Yerash, who are the consorts of Anu, or at least two of the consorts, because he also has a consort named Antu, who I believe becomes a Nat, but that's through my own linguistic or etymological research that I've done. But that's a different story. That's when we get to the Elohim. But either ways, with the Anunnaki, we have Tiamat, Apsu, Anu, Ki, Yerash, Antu, if you want to include her. We have Inanna, who is known as Ishtar. We have Ishkur. We have Enki. We have Enlil. We have Nergal. We have Ereshkigal. Even she's important. And she's also important to the Elohim, which we're going to get to. But we have so many deities. We have Amurru. We have Marduk. And these two are also very important to this narrative. So we understand that there are a lot of deities under the Anunnaki. But where do these deities find their similarities in the Elohim? Well, in the Elohim, we have deities like Tahamatu. We have deities like Yam. Now, Tahamatu and Yam, or even Prince Naharu, who is another similar deity to Yam, could be considered deities that are similar to Tiamat and Apsu, which are gods or goddesses of the fresh water and the salt water, or of the chaotic waters, or the primordial waters, however you want to define it, because it was defined differently at different times. I even propose that Tiamat may be Namu, which was a more peaceful and benevolent deity, rather than a malevolent deity in which that she was during the Babylonian era. But I believe that this is where you start to see parallels, but the parallels get stronger, because while a lot of you may think that Anu is an El counterpart, as in this may be an El equivalent, Anu is an El equivalent in role, not necessarily in role and possibly in character, not necessarily in his entire being. Anu is a sky deity. El could be considered a sky deity, but El is beyond a sky deity, just like Anu in the Anunnaki rendition of his story is beyond a sky deity. But when Anu is under the Anunnaki stories or rendition of this telling of this sacred story that I think is really just one story being purported across multiple cultures and civilizations throughout history, or throughout their history, I think that Anu is also another deity known as Samuma, or Samu, or Shemayim, which is a sky deity under the Elohim. Now, this deity is said to be beneath El, And we know this based off of Hurrian and Hittite sources and even the Greco-Roman sources, where they depict a deity named Elis. And this deity is over Anu, who the Greco-Romans equated to Uranus. And also they would call Apigius. So this was their god of the sky, but they believed that in certain renditions he was the son of Elis, who is El. But also they had beliefs in the Hurrians and Hittite empires where he was the predecessor or the father of El. And Dagon is also included in this bunch. But Dagon has been long standing on his own without needing to be directly characterized as an Anunnaki or an Elohim. So he is not necessarily an Anu or El analog as being their equivalent, but on their level. And Anu and El are also on similar levels. But the equivalent to Anu from the Elohim or from the list of Elim or gods of the Levant or of the lower Middle East or the ancient Near East would be Shemayim. And we see that there are variants of this called, for example, Baal Shemayim or Baal Shamam, which is just Lord of the Sky. That's the Elohim or the Levant or the Levantine counterpart, or the Arabian Peninsula counterpart to the greater Mesopotamian Anunnaki depiction that we have of this same variant of a deity. And then we have El, who is the Elohim variant of Enlil or Enlil. Enlil is the son and sometimes sibling and sometimes predecessor and successor of Anu. Now, Anu, Enlil, and Enki are said to be very equivalent by the Babylonians and the Akkadians and the people of Sumer, the Sumerians. But there are cults that existed back in the day where they had different hierarchies, where they stood differently amongst each other. But they were said to be rivaling Most Highs, which is why we see El as a rivaling Most High, and why we have the Elohim as a rivaling group to the Anunnaki. But it's really just the same group, but reinterpreted with El at the top instead of Anu at the top. Because under the Elohim, Anu is made subjective to El, or made lower than El under the hierarchy, while he is still an important deity as the ruler of the heavens, the ruler of the Hashemayim. He is still created and dictated or ordered by El. And El, who is Enlil or Elil, has had that same stance going on since his inception. When Enlil was first perceived or first attested to, Anu was being attested to at the same time. As a matter of fact, they go tip for tap on which one was attested to first. I see some evidence that shows that Anu came first, some evidence that shows that Enlil came first. But either ways, we know that these deities have a relationship and that they are deities that are competing for the Most High alongside Dagon, who is known as Kumarbi under the Anunnaki. Now, this Kumarbi label is given later to Dagon by the Hurrian and Hittites. But either ways, it still stands that Dagon is in this, because he is also known as a Most High, or as a sovereign father, or as a grand patron deity that is on top of this henotheistic platform of, or this polytheistic platform you see on theology. So after Anu and Enlil, who are Samuma or Shemayim, and El or El Elyon, who is also known as Asher. If you ever want definitive proof that El is Enlil, El is also known as Asher, and Asher is also known as Enlil. And Asher's consort is Asherah. That's how we know the name Asherah. She was called Atarat, or she would have been called another variant of that, even in the Hebrew terms. But we know her under many Semitic names that all relate back to that root that goes back to Asherah. And we know El by that too. El is Asher. Just like Allah and Alat, just like El and Elat, just like Asher and Asherah, these are the same deities. So, is Asherah supposed to be Antu? That's questionable. I don't think so. Is Asherah supposed to be Yerash? I think there's a better explanation for that. is Asherah supposed to be Ki? Possibly if Ki is syncretic with Ninhursag, because I believe that Asherah is Ninhursag, and Asherah may even be Eve, because Eve is the female cognate to Yahweh. Her name means life. Hawa, Haya. Haya is the male version. Hawa is the female version. Some say Shava, or some say that Eve could be a completely separate deity that is just the opposite of Yahweh in terms of the feminine counterpart, because a lot of deities have a feminine counterpart, like Astarte has Atar, you know what I'm saying? So a lot of deities have a male and feminine counterpart. So in the Anunnaki, I believe that Ki or Ninhursag is Asherah, because Asherah is also known as Belet Ili, which is another name for Ki or Ninhursag, and Belet Ili has a connection to Baal Hadad and El. You can look into that on your free time. But then we also have Enki, and this is where things get very interesting. Shoot, things continue to get interesting from this point. But Enki, I mean, things were already interesting, but Enki is, in my opinion, in my very strong opinion, Yahweh, because Enki is a god of life. That is, and we know that he is a god of life because he is the god of life-giving waters of the Apsu. Enki means god of the Apsu, even though you would think that the etymology is telling you that he is the god of land, Enki, you know what I'm saying? But no, he is the god of the subterranean waters. But also, he is the god of life. Under the Anunnaki stories, Enki is said to be the giver of life, the creator of life. Other Anunnaki help participate, like Ninhursag, or even Anu and Enlil, or even Ishkur. But Enki is the main life giver, the main life creator, alongside Ninhursag. And we know that Yahweh has a relationship with Asherah under the Elohim, where he and her are said to be the life givers under the Elohim, the theology, and under their stories, depending on the time period, obviously. But we also see this in the Bible. When Yahweh creates life, he doesn't do it by himself. When the Elohim create life, they are together. They do this in Genesis 1:26, where they say, let us create man in our image. And you see that they use the word Elohim there, meaning that there are multiple deities at work when they are creating life. But then we also see in Genesis 2, when Yahweh is creating life, other Elohim are still there. It says Yahweh Elohim. Yahweh and the other Elohim are the ones responsible for creating life, even in the biblical narrative, because the Israelites are Canaanites, and the Canaanites believed that multiple Elohim were responsible for their existence and for their being. More proof that Yahweh is Enki is because in the flood narrative, which is a narrative that Enki shares with Yahweh, where Enki is supposed to be rescuing a chosen person, or a person that he particularly favors, such as Itnapushkim or Ziazudra or Atrahasis, while we have Yahweh rescuing Noah and his family. And we know that other Elohim are responsible for this flood, just like in the Anunnaki story, where other Anunnaki are responsible for the flood. In the Anunnaki story, it is Anu, Enlil, Ishkur, and a bunch of other Anunnaki that are responsible for this flood. But then in the Elohim story, we see that it may have had something to do with Yam. But we know that Yahweh helped build this craft, which means Yahweh may be a craftsman deity also. And I believe that may connect Yahweh to another deity that may be a bridge between Yahweh and Enki, which is a deity named Kotawakasis, who is also known as Hayanu. Kotawakasis, who is also known as Hayanu, may be the connective tissue we need between Yahweh and Enki, other than just linguistic and etymological connections that they already have by sharing roots with Haya. Haya is also another name that Enki goes by, and he goes by it in multiple variants. Sometimes it's AIA, sometimes it's EA, which is Ia or Ya, and sometimes it's HYA. So we know that Enki has a connection to the name Haya, to the root HY, which is the same root that Yahweh gets his name from. Yahweh gets his name from the root Haya, which means to live or to be. Now, some people suggest that it means to blow, but even that doesn't disqualify Yahweh from being Enki, because Enki is also a craftsman deity who helped his people build their cities and their arks, like in the flood and stuff, the same way Yahweh helped Noah and helped other Israelites with their blueprints on the things that they were trying to construct. So Yahweh may very well be a craftsman deity, even based off the other definition of his name, which means to blow. But that is also very speculative. But it is also speculative to say that his name means to be. So either one could be. But I believe that Yahweh is Enki, because they share similar story dynamics and they share similar roles. And when you share similar roles in the ancient times, then you are more than likely the same God, as you're going to see with this next deity, which is Ishkur, who is also known as Adad. That this should be so on the nose, that is so obvious. Ishkur, aka Adad, is Hadad, Baal Hadad, who is the Lord of Thunder. It means thunderer. Hadad is the god of thunder, rain, hailstorms, unless you want to give hail to Quosh. But I think that Baal Hadad is Ishkur. And this is heavily stated, this is heavily supported by scholars, and the evidence is all over the place. They are the same deities, and Baal Hadad was just adopted from Ishkur, or it's just a continuation of Ishkur. I believe these gods may be continuations or adaptations. But then you also have Ishkur's sister, or sometimes cousin, or sometimes just consort, or sometimes just contemporary, which is Ishtar. Ishtar is obviously Astarte, or Ashtoreth, as we know her in the Bible, the queen of heaven, the daughter of Anu, or sometimes the daughter of Sin, who is also known as Nana, or the sun god, or moon god. She is said to be the sister of Shamash, which is the sun god under the Annunaki, but Shamash is also Shemesh or Shapsu under the Elohim. There are plenty of connections I could go through, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping all over the place. It's just there's so much up here to unpack about these things that I could really go anywhere with this. But Ishtar is obviously Astarte. I don't think that needs to be stated too hard or too often. And this even goes all the way down to Easter, because we know that this goes to Ashtoreth, Astarte, Aostra. This even goes to Ast, who is Aset, who is Isis, and Kemet, which even connects the Neteru, and the Neteru are connected through many other avenues. But then you also have the simple fact that she is known in German as Eostre, which translates to Easter, in which that we got to today. And yes, that is true. So we have those gods, and we also have Nergal, who is Reshef, and his consort Ereshkigal, who is Arse, who is the daughter of Baal Hadad, or Ishkur. Now, Reshef, being Nergal, is also on the nose. It's very obvious. Nergal is the god of plague. Reshef is the god of plague. Reshef works with Yahweh. Nergal has a relationship with the Anunnaki, like Enki and Enlil and Anu, just as Reshef has a relationship with El and Yahweh and Baal Hadad and Asherah and his consort Ereshkigal, who is Arse under the Elohim. His other consort is Adama, who is also Adama or Admu under the Anunnaki. You see how many parallels we have? There are a lot of parallels that we have between these two, which means they have to be similar. We see the Israelites and Yahweh go to war with the Amorites. And who is the god of the Amorites? Amuru. Amuru, the son of Anu. You see? And who is Amuru's consort? Ashratum. Ashratum is another name that the Amorites gave to Ashura. Amuru could just as easily be a younger version of El, or a more distinct version of El, but I argue that Amuru is a distinct deity, and that Amuru is actually El Shaddai, as we see in the Bible, because there is a deity from Ugarit which is called Quetsu wa Amuru. Quetsu wa Amuru. Quetsu is another word for Kadesh or Quetesh, which is another name or label for Asherah and El, or Asher and El. Asher and Asherah, they go by the name Kodesh, which means holy. So I believe that this hints to the relationship between El Shaddai, who is, or just Shaddai, because El Shaddai could really just be the epithet of Els, but Shaddai is a distinct deity from El. Shaddai is a mountainous deity. It means almighty. And Shaddai is a murderer, because Amurru goes by the name Bel Sadu, which is just the Amorite version of El Shaddai, or just Shaddai. So, and with his consort being Asherah, who is also known as Qutshu or Qutshu or Quadesh, and we have a deity that is a hypostasis of Amurru and Qutshu, who is Asherah and Amurru. I think that's pretty much on the nose too. And there are plenty other similarities, like Yarik and Nikal. We have Sin and Ea. These are the moon gods and the harvest gods, or the festival gods in terms of Nikal and Yarik. They also have a festival thing associated with them. But we know that Sin is a moon god. We know that Ea is a dawn goddess, which means she could have some connection to Shahar and Shalim, which are dawn and dusk gods, or B'nai Elohim under El. But I'm just showing you guys basic connections, and asking the question: are the Anunnaki and the Elohim the same? Are the Anunnaki just a rendition of these gods when Anu is at the top, and the Elohim when El is at the top? Or is there something else going on here? You tell me.